If you have high caseload and active community spread, just like we're asking people not to go to bars, not to have household parties, not to create large spreading events, we're asking people to distance learn at this moment so we can get this epidemic under control.
Dr. Birx also said the outbreak, and I'm quoting here, extraordinarily widespread, which is of course at odds with what the president has been saying. Hours later, the president sent a tweet going after Dr. Birx for the first time, saying she was agreeing with Pelosi, which is pathetic. Again, our president's words. Soon after, Trump tweeted out, "Open the schools," in all caps with 3 exclamation points for good measure. Despite the demands from the White House, many of the largest school districts, they're not following his lead, refusing to send their kids back into classrooms right away, including that Los Angeles. Take a listen to the superintendent there.
When the new school year starts the week of August 17th, it'll start without students at school. The threat from the virus is currently too great.
But lest you think this is some blue state thing, in Gwinnett County, Georgia, which is just outside of Atlanta, the largest district in the state here, 260 faculty members tested positive after they reported for work trying to get the schools ready for the students. District, hey, they've pushed back the reopening to next week, but as we say, that's still fluid. And in central Indiana, one district shut down on day 2 after at least one staffer tested positive in addition to a student. It's just a small sample of what schools are dealing with, the problems and challenges hardly unique to the U.S. Israel was one of the first countries to fully reopen its schools, and their numbers were far better than ours. And to put it politely, it did not go well. Within days, a Jerusalem high school had a slew of cases that spread to the homes of the students and the teachers, causing a cluster, other outbreaks, forcing hundreds of other Israeli schools to shutter. Top officials now admit it was a huge mistake to rush the kids back into classrooms. Let's bring in our guest right now, Kristi Wilson. She's superintendent of the Buckeye School District in the Phoenix area. She's also president of the School Superintendents Association. Kristi, I do not envy being a school superintendent right now with all the moving parts. We all know everybody wants the kids to be back in the classrooms. I'm a parent of 3. I feel the same way. In-person learning, so much better. But I look at what happened in Israel. I look at what happened in Indiana. I look at what's happening in Georgia between the camps and the school, and all these promises that, hey, kids are going to be fine here. Everything's all set, good to go. We can't get out of the gate on this, and people, I think, are underestimating the challenges that lie ahead. You obviously speak to a national constituency. Is there a consensus that people are worried about what school is going to bring?
Well, thank you for having me, and thank you for those words. I think you're right. I think there is a concern. I think that for a long time, we've been speaking about safety and been pretty loud about the fact that infection rate in individual communities is what is at stake. And just here in Arizona alone, the infection rate is not at that 5 to 7%, which is what Dr. Birx and other experts just this week has said it needs to be in order to open safely. So you definitely are speaking the truth. And I think we're seeing that, you know, in order to open safely, which is what we want to do, that there's no question we want to have schools open. We want to have students and teachers back in our buildings, but we want to do it safely. And infection rates have to be down in that lower percentage in order to do so.
And Kristi, for me, and you're the perfect person to talk to. If we start from the premise, hopefully we all do, that all kids are equal here. We want the best for all children, regardless of what corner of this country they come from. If they're in a city, a suburb, or a rural area, every kid deserves a fair education and a safe one at that. It seems that, forget about every state, every school district has their own unique set of challenges, completely different guidances. You have people, well-meaning, good and decent people, your constituencies. They're not virologists, they're not epidemiologists. How are they supposed to figure out how the right way to space a classroom? Who's got the right ventilation in the classroom? Do you have masking that you're going to provide for kids who don't come? How does it work in terms of who comes in and out of the hallways at whatever time? If a kid gets it, Do you shut the whole thing down? Do you shut down only the classroom? Are these rules, use your district. Are they uniform across the board? Or are they different for the school? How the heck is this supposed to work?
Yeah, I think what you're talking about is we have politicians who want to use the word flexibility and wide latitude, and they're, in my mind, passing the buck. They're telling us, who, by the way, we have become what I like to term efficiency experts for a long time in public education. We used to, a friend of mine I was just talking to said, hey, I used to buy software that helped me run efficiency bus routes so that I could put as many kids on a bus as I possibly could and run the least number of routes as I possibly could. And also, we used to try to, because the taxpayers want us to do this, put as many kids in a classroom as I possibly can so that I could become an efficiency expert. And I think what we're seeing here is now, because of the social distancing guidelines, and the CDC experts are telling us, hey, you have to social distance, you have to wear masks, and we have to now become these efficiency experts in a different way. And so your question about how do you do this? In Arizona, we have the highest teacher, student, and counselor student ratios in the nation. So it's absolutely impossible to open safely when the infection rates are what they are. And to your question about uniformity, it's not actually, in my opinion, it's not fair to say to one family, you can come in if you need childcare options, but say to another family, you can't. So it's nearly impossible without uniformity from states and counties.
And let's stay in Arizona. You go to the most affluent area, let's say in Scottsdale, and then you go to inner city in Phoenix, okay? They're not going back to the same household. They don't have the same online capability. As I understand it, the teachers haven't been given the same amount of training. They don't have the same amount of computers at home. Then you talk about the environments they're going back into, some with more densely populated households where, each kid can't have their own bedroom, let's say, to do their learning in, let alone their own laptop. I don't know what the answer is, so I feel like it's a cheap shot to say this isn't going to work, but at the same end, it's not going to work. We know this going into it, and I just feel for you guys because you're getting thrown in the deep end of the pool.
Well, we appreciate that. I think what we can do is we can learn from what other countries are doing. We can learn from places where they have reopened successfully. They've started slow. They've done so in a respectful and a responsible way. And we know what doesn't work. And that's this widespread, open, just unsafe ways. And that's why we're pushing in Arizona, and I know in other states, to work with the medical professionals to define metrics before we open. I think, when you can work with the medical field, and from a superintendent's point of view, you can say, this is how class sizes work. This is what we need for PPE. This is how much it costs. We can plan, but the medical experts are the ones who can tell us, this is what has to happen when you get a case. This is what happens when you open and you reopen or you close. It's that expanding and retracting. And right now, we're being told that individual school districts, local school boards, and superintendents can make those decisions. And my concern, and I think I hear you saying the same concern, is without that uniformity in policy and executive orders, et cetera, too much latitude is being given, and you're going to potentially see, without those really strict restrictions, this opening too soon and then closing down. In Arizona right now, we still have not been given guidance on what to do if there's a case in your local school district.
And how about the moving parts that, the reality is on the economic level, states have had no revenue coming in. They're hemorrhaging money, and they're going to be taking an axe, not a scalpel, to their budgets. And school funding very well, if not possibly, if not probably, is going to be cut right in the face of a pandemic. And you have states that don't even require masks of people. So you could have teachers going maskless into schools, let alone kids. Okay, all that said, you've heard some of the criticism that have come to schools. The Wall Street Journal, had an editorial today where they said in no uncertain terms They accused teacher unions of using COVID as political extortion. There was a piece in the Post today where Mark Thiessen basically went even stronger, and he said, no one is forcing anyone to teach, but that's not what the teacher unions want. They want taxpayers to continue paying teachers for not doing their jobs. Sorry, that's not how it works. No profession is without risk in a pandemic, but plenty of Americans in high-risk professions are showing up for work because they perform essential services. Most Americans consider what teachers do to be essential. Apparently, they give teachers more credit than many give themselves. What do you say to folks who say that teachers are trying to hold people over the barrel here and they're extorting Americans?
I think that's just a talking point that folks that have struggled with public school advocates and folks that, for a long time, public education's been underfunded, sorely underfunded. And this is just another excuse to blame advocates that come out, and what we're trying to do is open schools safely. And we're trying to also help people understand, in order to open safely, there's a price tag. This costs money. So I think the other side of that, of course, they're going to argue that, it's a union talking point, and unions just want to, constantly argue the point that we're never satisfied, or they're never satisfied, and there's never enough money. But the reality is, like I mentioned earlier, we have been coined efficiency experts for a very long time. I mean, packing in the number of classrooms stacked with kids and, large class sizes and countless number of students on buses. And now they want us to turn that upside down. Well, that comes at a price tag. So that has nothing to do with this argument that the other side is making. It costs money. In order for us to social distance, you have to either have more space in your schools, or you have to hire more people to do so. And, like you mentioned earlier, we're probably going to be faced with some sort of budget cut anyway. So you can't have it both ways. You have to have more funding and more space in order to do this safely.
Well, Kristi, I say this a lot, but I mean this particularly with you. I wish you the best of luck, you and all the superintendents, trying to navigate what is a minefield out there. But best of luck to you in the coming weeks and months.
Well, thank you so much. And we really appreciate the opportunity to speak and lend this voice. Thanks, Richard.
Up next, we're going to show you where COVID is spreading as we speak, and also we'll discuss the scope of the outbreak with ABC News Chief Medical Correspondent, Dr. Jen Ashton.